This case looks simple on the surface, a routine traffic stop, a civil infraction, and a modest fine. But as you're about to see, what unfolds inside this courtroom is anything but routine. We're dealing with a charge of following too closely, a law that sounds straightforward yet depends entirely on interpretation, judgment, and credibility. On one side, we have a deputy with years of experience. On the other, a defendant who came prepared, armed with video evidence and a sharp defense strategy. The tension here isn't about speed, it's about standards. What does reasonable and prudent actually mean under the law? Does a rule of thumb carry legal weight, or is it just roadside advice? And most importantly, when video evidence enters the courtroom, who does it really help? Stay with this case, because the twists don't come from dramatic testimony. They come from what wasn't reviewed, what wasn't presented, and what the judge ultimately sees with his own eyes. Notice what the officer relies on here: estimation. He observes traffic from the opposite direction, makes a judgment call about distance, and initiates a stop after turning around and following for half a mile. That's legally permissible, but it opens the door to scrutiny. Estimations are inherently subjective, especially when speed, distance, and terrain are involved. The defense will later lean heavily into this gap between observation and documentation. And pay attention to what's missing. The officer does not initially recall the specific vehicle, the model, or detailed conditions. In traffic cases, those gaps don't automatically invalidate testimony, but they weaken its persuasive force when challenged by a skilled cross-examination. This is a pivotal legal moment. The defense objects not to the officer's experience, but to the scope of his opinion. The court draws a clear line. This deputy is qualified as a traffic enforcement officer, not an accident reconstruction expert. That distinction limits how far his conclusions can go. He can explain why he issued the ticket, but not present specialized conclusions beyond his training. This ruling protects fairness in court by preventing overreach while still allowing practical law enforcement experience to be considered. It's a reminder that expertise in court is not assumed. It must be defined, qualified, and limited. Here's where the defense begins to systematically dismantle assumptions. The officer admits he used a rule of thumb, 1 car length per 10 miles per hour, but cannot cite a legal source. That matters. Courts don't enforce rules of thumb, they enforce statutes. And Michigan law doesn't give a numerical formula, it uses flexible language, reasonable and prudent. The defense smartly contrasts roadside guidance with statutory authority and official driver publications. This is textbook cross-examination, not aggressive, not emotional, just precise. The question for viewers becomes, should informal guidance ever substitute for written law? The introduction of terrain changes everything. Hills alter braking distance, visibility, and driver behavior, and the judge himself injects that context. Then comes the video issue. The prosecution didn't present it, the defense did. That's rare and risky. Video evidence is a double-edged sword. It can clarify facts, but it can also erase ambiguity. The officer confirms the footage does not show the initial observation, only the stop. That leaves the judge to evaluate what he can see, not what was originally alleged. At this point, the entire case pivots on visual impression rather than testimony. This is the moment the courtroom energy shifts. The judge openly acknowledges weaknesses in the prosecution's preparation, unclear testimony, lack of review, missed opportunities. But then he says something critical. The video sunk your boat. Despite procedural flaws, the visual evidence convinced him. This highlights a hard truth in traffic court. Preparation errors don't always outweigh clear evidence. The judge also clarifies the statute, rejecting the rule of thumb while still finding the conduct unreasonable under real-world conditions. It's a nuanced ruling, and one that underscores judicial discretion. In the end, this case wasn't about speed limits or formulas. It was about judgment. The court found that under the totality of circumstances, road conditions, traffic flow, terrain, and video evidence, the defendant followed too closely. The $120 fine and points reflect a civil accountability standard, not criminal punishment. But the broader takeaway is clear. Preparation matters, video matters, and statutory language always outweighs informal rules. If you found this case as revealing as we did, make sure to hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth, no-nonsense courtroom breakdowns.